Hello everybody, welcome to my channel. My name is Christian Sorensen, and again, thank you for coming back in. Anyway, if you've been on the YouTube fitness page, or YouTube fitness community rather, you might have come across this guy. A certain guy called Vince Sant, aka the V-Shred guy. And Vince absolutely despises slow and steady cardio. He calls it steady-state cardio, but steady-state cardio, slow and steady cardio, essentially they're the same thing. Basically, Vince hates slow and steady cardio with a passion. You might have heard him on his commercials. In one commercial, Vince says that if he sees somebody run on the treadmill, he's going to jump in a pool. Pretty weird thing to say, but that's the way he rolls sometimes, I guess. So as you know, Vince hates slow and steady cardio. And he argues that slow and steady cardio is quote-unquote bad exercise, his words. Vince makes a lot of claims about slow and steady cardio, among which that HIIT cardio is better exercise compared to slow and steady cardio. Vince argues that HIIT cardio, aka high-intensity interval training cardio, he argues that HIIT cardio burns more calories relative to slow and steady cardio, and therefore HIIT is better exercise, in his mind at least. Vince also argues that slow and steady cardio actually makes you fatter, and therefore is ineffective for weight loss. Yeah, all of that is kind of bullshit, and I'll use scientific studies to explain why everything that Vince says about slow and steady cardio is wrong. I'm more specifically going to debunk 4 of Vince's points. Alright? The first argument that Vince makes, the first argument is that HIIT cardio burns more calories relative to slow and steady cardio. The second argument that Vince makes is that slow and steady cardio is ineffective for weight loss due to the compensation effect. The third argument that Vince makes is that slow and steady cardio is worse for weight loss when compared to weightlifting. Finally, the fourth and final argument that Vince makes is that slow and steady cardio is bad exercise because it burns calories. Yes, as stupid and as moronic as that argument is, Vince seriously said that. I'm going to debunk all 4 of these points that Vince makes in this video, and I'll cite scientific studies to support my arguments. The first counter-argument I will make to Vince is that HIIT does not inherently burn more calories relative to slow and steady cardio. And by the way, Vince says that HIIT cardio burns more calories than slow and steady cardio because HIIT burns more calories after the workout as opposed to slow and steady cardio. That's extremely misleading, and I'll go into that shortly. But suffice it to say that my counter-argument is that HIIT cardio does not inherently burn more calories relative to slow and steady cardio, so HIIT is not inherently better for weight loss or fat loss when compared to slow and steady cardio. My second counterpoint to Vince is that slow and steady cardio is in fact effective for weight loss and fat loss, and scientific studies support that. Alright, scientific studies do show that people lose weight when they do slow and steady cardio. So Vince says that you cannot lose weight with slow and steady cardio, but studies overwhelmingly refute that. I'll also have a brief discussion on the compensation effect that he talks about. The third counter-argument I'm going to make is that when you compare, and scientific studies show this by the way, when you compare weight training only with slow and steady cardio only, the people who do slow and steady cardio only consistently lose more weight and lose more fat relative to weightlifting only. Alright? So studies overwhelmingly show that slow and steady cardio results in more weight loss and more fat loss when compared to weight training only. Alright? So when Vince says that weight training results in more weight loss or fat loss compared to slow and steady cardio, he's overwhelmingly wrong because the science demonstratively shows otherwise. And the fourth and final counterpoint I'm going to make is that, honestly, his argument on slow and steady cardio burns calories, therefore it's bad exercise, it's beyond stupid, and I'll refute that shortly, but this is basically the outline for the presentation I'm going to make, and you might want to take notes, because it's going to be a lot. Also, I will put all the studies in the description below, so you can cite you can rather fact check me on all my sources. And I, in fact, encourage you to do so. So, check out all the studies I'm going to link in the description, and you can fact check me there. Now, a relevant question, a fair question to ask is, who am I to tell you anything about slow and steady cardio or whatever? And that's a perfectly fair question. Alright? Here's who I am as it pertains to slow and steady cardio. In high school and college, alright, I did cross-country and track and field. I did cross-country and track all 4 years of high school and all 4 years of college. And I was pretty good at it. Not trying to brag, but I was good at it, alright? In cross-country, I think I ran a 15:45 3-mile. That was my PR in high school. I never made it downstate, if you could believe that, but I did run a 15:45 in the 3-mile. I did, however, go downstate in the 2-mile for track and field. I ran a 10:10 in the state track meet, which I think was 23rd place in the state. So not elite, but still pretty good. I went to college, and I had decent success in college, in high school and cross country and track and field. In fact, in my sophomore year and my junior year, I actually placed in the 10K in track and field. The 10K is also called the 10,000 meter. So I'm not trying to brag, but I was pretty good at high school and track. What this means is that I have a lot of experience doing slow and steady cardio. If you do track and field, you're going to do a lot of slow and steady cardio. So when Vince, bitches about how slow and steady cardio sucks, well, he's kind of attacking me personally and other cross-country track runners as well. So I just want to, refute some of his nonsense there. But besides slow and steady cardio, I've also done HIIT cardio on my own. I run almost every day, and I've done both slow and steady cardio and HIIT cardio. So I have experience doing both, which is more experience than what a lot of people have. And also, I work as a physical therapist assistant. I'm a licensed physical therapist assistant, and as part of the curriculum, you have to read scientific studies. Alright? That's just part of the schooling. What this means is that I have experience reading scientific studies. I know that a lot of YouTube fitness influencers will often blindly read a study and not know what it's saying because they're slow, I guess. But as for me, I actually do kind of know how to read a scientific study. Not saying I'm a PhD necessarily, but I have experience reading scientific studies. So, let's dive into it. Get your notebooks, take breaks if you have to during the video, and enjoy. Okay, the first point I'm going to make is that HIIT does not inherently burn more calories relative to slow and steady cardio. Alright? Vince claims that HIIT burns more calories compared to slow and steady cardio. More specifically, Vince claims that HIIT burns more calories after the workout as opposed to slow and steady cardio. You might have seen him in his commercial where Vince says that if you do HIIT cardio, you burn calories for up to 48 hours after the workout, as opposed to if you do slow and steady cardio, you burn virtually no calories after the workout. Therefore, in his mind, HIIT burns more calories compared to slow and steady cardio. And because HIIT burns more calories after the workout, it is more effective for weight loss and fat loss when compared to slow and steady cardio. The only problem is that that's kind of bullshit. Alright, Vince is wrong about this, and the scientific studies show this pretty clearly. Alright, now, when Vince talks about burning calories after the workout, there's a term for that. It's called EPOC. EPOC stands for excess post-exercise oxygen consumption. EPOC basically is where you burn calories after you do a workout. Now, this is a good time to point out that EPOC occurs after all exercises, okay? It doesn't matter what the exercise is. Jump rope, swimming, running, rollerblading, weightlifting, resistance band training, gymnastics, playing basketball, anything, all right? Any exercise that you do has EPOC to some extent. Virtually every exercise will burn calories after the workout to some extent. Now, some exercises burn more calories after the workout compared to others, but all of them have EPOC to some extent, is my point. So, Vince argues that HIIT burns more calories after the workout compared to slow and steady cardio. Therefore, HIIT burns more calories overall. Now, to be fair to Vince, he's not completely wrong here, because HIIT does burn more calories after the workout compared to slow and steady cardio. To be more technical, HIIT indeed has more EPOC compared to slow and steady cardio. The only problem is that the amount is so small that it doesn't really matter. Alright? HIIT has more EPOC compared to slow and steady cardio, but the amount of EPOC is so small that it's not significant, so it doesn't really matter. And we have a study for this, by the way. This is Scientific Reports 2024. This study looked at 21 college-age men, and all of these men did treadmill running. Pretty basic. Now, these 21 college-age men did both HIIT workouts on the treadmill, and they did slow and steady workouts on the treadmill. Not at the same time, obviously, but you get the idea. So, these 21 men did both HIIT and slow and steady cardio. And each workout burned almost exactly 300 calories during the actual workout, okay? So, we have the same men, all right? The same men doing the same workouts on the treadmill, burning almost exactly the same amount of calories during the workout, okay? So, this is a really good study. The only difference here is the EPOC. The only difference was the calories burned after the workout. That was the only difference here. So, regardless of workout, every workout burned almost exactly 300 calories. The only difference is in the EPOC. So what happened when they measured the EPOC? Well, when the researchers took EPOC into account, they realized that the HIIT sessions burned 369.53 total calories, 30 minutes after the workout. Compares to slow and steady cardio. Slow and steady cardio, once EPOC was taken into account, burned 346.23 calories, 30 minutes after the workout. What that means is that once EPOC was taken into account, the HIIT sessions burned 23.3 more calories compared to the slow and steady cardio sessions. So HIIT burned 23 more calories? That's not significant at all. Alright? That's such a marginal amount, you could probably do a bench press workout and burn 23 more calories that way. I mean, 23 more calories is not significant at all. It's not meaningful for the majority of people. So, Vince says that HIIT burns more calories after the workout compared to slow and steady cardio. This paper here shows technically, yes, HIIT does burn more calories, but the amount of calories burned is so minute that it doesn't matter in the grand scheme of things. Alright? You're not going to lose weight by burning 23 more calories. That's just not going to happen. Another thing I should mention is that Vince says that you burn calories up to 2 days after the workout for 8 hours. Well, Vince can go screw himself because the science shows that he's wrong. According to this paper here, the EPOC from the HIIT and the slow and cardio sessions was identical up to 10 to 30 minutes after the workout. The paper, from what I could gather, only looked at the workout and then 30 minutes after the workout, so it didn't look at, hours after the workout. But even so, I think it's pretty telling that the EPOC from both HIIT and slow and steady cardio was identical from minutes 10 to 30 after the workout. Alright? if the epoch was identical up to 10 to 30 minutes after the workout, I think we could reasonably infer that the epoch would be identical an hour, 2 hours, 48 hours away from the workout. All right? So, Vince says you will burn more calories up to 2 days after a HIIT workout compared to a slow and steady workout, but that is straight up bullshit. All right, that is bullshit because the study here, all right, shows that epoch is identical for the most part after a HIIT session and a slow and steady session. All right, so where he gets that 48 hours from, I don't know. He got it from his asshole, maybe, I don't know, but he certainly didn't get it from real life. So, what we can say from this study here is that HIIT cardio does have more epoch compared to slow and steady cardio, but the amount is so small that it does not matter. Okay, now, we already established that epoch burns extremely a little bit more compared to slow and steady cardio. So, obviously epoch is not the magic pill that Vince pretends that it is. But even if you take epoch out of the equation, HIIT does not inherently burn more calories compared to slow and steady cardio. It depends on the workout. I'll use myself in as an example here. If I do a 26-minute HIIT workout on a treadmill, I've done that plenty of times. If I do a 26-minute HIIT workout, I burn about 350 to about 450 calories during the actual workout. Now, I know that treadmills and other machines are not 100% accurate, so that's why I'm giving a range here. But suffice it to say, I can burn 350 to 450 calories, anywhere in that range, during a 26-minute HIIT workout. That's decent. That's not too bad. But, if I run for an hour, then I'll burn about 550 calories to about 700 calories, running slow and steady for 1 hour. I don't know about you, but 550 to 700 calories is sure a lot better, is way more compared to 350 to 450 calories during a HIIT session. So it depends. Sometimes HIIT burns more calories relative to slow and steady cardio. But sometimes slow and steady cardio burns more calories than a HIIT session. It depends. So HIIT does not inherently burn more calories compared to slow and steady cardio. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. It depends. Now, I also want to talk about practical considerations of HIIT versus slow and steady cardio. All right? The reality is both forms of cardio have pros and cons. And the onus is on you, the viewer, to decide which one's right for you. Both, like I said, have pros and cons. For example, HIIT is relatively time efficient. If you have, say, 20 or 30 minutes to work out, you can do a really good HIIT session in that time period and get a decent amount of calories burned. Conversely, with slow and steady cardio, 20 to 30 minutes of running or whatever is something, but to get more of a benefit from slow and steady cardio, you have to go for a little bit longer. We're talking like maybe 30 minutes to maybe an hour and a half to get more of a benefit, relatively speaking. So, slow and steady cardio is fine, but it's not the most time-efficient way of working out. Some people also find that HIIT is more enjoyable compared to slow and steady cardio. All right, with HIIT, you're alternating between intense periods and less intense periods. And many people find that enjoyable. Good on them. I'm happy for them. But many people find that slow and steady cardio is boring because you're running at a relatively slow pace the whole time. Or you're biking, swimming, or whatever at a slow pace. Many people find slow and steady cardio boring. So for those people, HIIT might be a better choice. However, HIIT's intensity, while a big pro, is also a con. Because you see, HIIT is so physically demanding that a lot of people can't stick with it for very long. HIIT, make no mistake, if you do a really hard HIIT session, you're going to be extremely tired for the rest of the day. I've gone to the gym before work, did a HIIT workout, and I was barely functional for the rest of the day. So I can tell you right now that HIIT is absolutely tiring if you do it right. So if you're concerned about fatigue, HIIT might not be the best choice for you. Slow and steady might be the way to go for you in that case. Similarly, because HIIT is so demanding, many people find that it's not enjoyable. Conversely, those people might find slow and steady more enjoyable because it's not as intense. So I don't want to go down a rabbit hole here because I could go all day about the pros and cons of slow and steady versus HIIT, but long story short, they both have pros and cons, and both of them can be effective depending on your preferences. And also, Vince gives the impression that you have to pick between slow and steady or HIIT. That's a little dishonest of him because guess what? You can do both. I've done both plenty of times. So have lots of other people. So why not do both? Okay, so I think we've debunked Vince's first point. HIIT does not inherently burn more calories relative to slow and steady. It depends. And also that HIIT does not burn more calories after the workout, or it kind of does, but it's such a small amount that it doesn't matter. So we've debunked Vince's first point. The second point that he makes is a little bit harder to debunk, or it takes longer rather, but I'm going to give it a shot. Vince's second point is that slow and steady cardio is not effective for weight loss. In fact, Vince argues that slow and steady cardio makes you fatter. That's wrong, by the way, and we'll get to that, but anyway, Vince argues that if you do slow and steady cardio for a long period of time, your body will stop burning fat. Instead, your body will store fat, according to Vince. So, according to Vince, if you do cardio for too long, your body will start to store fat. And when your body stores fat, you become fatter. Therefore, according to Vince, doing slow and steady cardio for too long will make you fatter. Therefore, slow and steady cardio is not effective for weight loss or fat loss. Vince claims that this fat storage is called the compensation effect. Okay, there is two major things wrong with this. First of all, the first thing is that no, your body does not store fat if you do cardio for too long. The human body does not work like this. Also, his definition of the compensation effect is wrong. Then again, it is V-Shred, and being a stupid moron who doesn't know anything is kind of his brand. But anyway, the first point I'm going to talk about is that your body does not store fat when you do slow and steady cardio. That is not how the human body works. All right? Let's look at real life to refute this. According to Vince, if you do slow and steady cardio for too long, you will store fat and therefore become morbidly obese, according to Vince. The problem is that real life refutes this. We have professional athletes, professional marathoners, professional cyclists, professional triathletes, professional swimmers, what have you. These professional athletes do slow and steady cardio for literally hours a day. All right? Tour de France riders literally ride for hours a day. All right? Professional swimmers practice for hours on end, typically. Ultramarathoners run for literally hours a day. All right? So these athletes here that I'm talking about, they do slow and steady cardio for literally hours a day, in some cases. By Vince's logic, if slow and steady cardio makes you fat, then these pro athletes should be morbidly obese. But they're not morbid obese. If you look at any professional marathoner, none of them are fat. Literally, zero. None of them are fat. You look at professional swimmers, zero of them are fat. None of them get fat, ever. Look at professional ultramarathoners, professional triathletes, professional sprinters, whatever. Literally, none of them are fat. And why? According to Vince, these pro athletes do cardio, slow and steady cardio, for hours on end, and therefore they should be morbid obese. But none of them are morbid obese. And you want to know why they are not morbid obese? They are not morbid obese because when you do hours of cardio on end, you will not store fat. All right? You do not get fat by doing cardio for hours on end. That is not going to happen, and the body has never worked like that. So, as I explained earlier, real life professional marathoners, professional cyclists, swimmers, what have you, you do not get fat if you do cardio for hours on end. That never happens, and you are not going to get fat if you do cardio for hours on end. All right? That just doesn't happen. And these pro athletes show that that doesn't happen. Another thing, you remember how I talked about that Vince's explanation of the compensation effect is wrong? Well, I did a bit of Google research, and the compensation effect is not at all what Vince says it is. So Vince says the compensation effect is where you store fat when you do cardio for too long. That's not what the compensation effect is. The compensation effect, rather, is when you engage in physical activity and then you compensate for that physical activity by being inactive for the rest of the day. Think of, like, say, the football player, a high school, college football player, whatever, practices for, like, say, 2 hours to, like, 5 hours a day. He comes home, eats dinner, and then chills out playing video games or whatever. That's the compensation effect. That right there is the compensation effect. He worked really hard. He did a lot of physical activity for hours. He's tired, so he compensates for being tired by sitting on his couch. That's the compensation. That's the compensation effect. Pretty simple. Similarly, if there's, say, an ultramarathoner who runs for hours a day, he's exhausted, he's tired, so he compensates for being tired by sitting on his couch and watching TV. I could go on, but you get my point. The compensation effect is not at all what Vince says it is. He's obscenely wrong on this. The fact that he's wrong about the compensation effect and the fact that your body does not store fat when you do cardio pretty much annihilates his credibility on this issue. So yeah, screw him, he's wrong. One last note I'm going to talk about. If you look at studies that show slow and steady cardio and weight loss, the studies overwhelmingly show that slow and steady cardio is effective for weight loss and fat loss. So Vince says it's that slow and steady cardio makes you fatter and therefore is ineffective for weight loss and fat loss, but the studies objectively show otherwise. The first study I'm going to look at is a meta-analysis published in the International Journal of Environmental Research and Public Health. A meta-analysis, for all you that don't know, is a combination of studies, all right? So it combines a lot of studies together to find a conclusion. When you look at a meta-analysis is really good evidence because it combines a lot of studies at once. So, in this 2023 meta-analysis, it looked at 29 studies. There were 404 total participants who did HIIT cardio and 403 participants who did slow and steady cardio. Well, according to this meta-analysis, it found that both the HIIT group and the slow and steady group saw similar and significant decreases in fat mass. The HIIT group and the slow and steady group saw significant and similar the HIIT group and the slow and steady group saw similar and significant decreases in overall body fat. The HIIT group and the slow and steady group saw overall significant and similar differences in body mass loss. Both of the groups saw similar and significant losses in fat mass. Very good. So I can go on, but you get my point. According to this meta-analysis, both HIIT cardio and slow and steady cardio resulted in weight loss and fat loss. So this study clearly shows that slow and steady cardio is effective for weight loss. This study shows that slow and steady cardio is effective for fat loss. So Vince says that slow and steady cardio makes you fatter, but this study right here shows that slow and steady cardio resulted in weight loss and that it resulted in fat loss. That completely debunks Vince's wrong conclusion. Slow and steady cardio, in fact, helps you lose weight and lose fat. This study very clearly proves it. So, screw you, Vince. You're an idiot and you're wrong. And by the way, it's not just one study, because we got more. Let's look at another meta-analysis. Again, combination of studies, very good evidence. All right. This 2024 meta-analysis, published in the Frontiers in Endocrinology, had 28 included studies. Now, I'm not going to dive into the weeds too much about this, but these 28 studies divided participants into 4 exercise groups. These exercise groups included slow and steady cardio only, HIIT cardio only, resistance training only, and a group that did both resistance training and slow and steady cardio. We're only going to focus on the slow and steady cardio and the HIIT cardio only for this presentation. What the heck happened? Well, first off, the slow and steady group and the HIIT group lost similar amounts of weight. So both of them were similar in weight loss. That's good. Slow and steady cardio works for weight loss. And there's more. All right? Now, I should note that the HIIT group did better in terms of losing body fat. So, in terms of body fat loss, the HIIT group did the best. That's not to say that slow and steady cardio is bad, however. The slow and steady cardio group also lost a significant amount of body fat. So in this study, the HIIT group lost a lot of body fat, which is pretty good. Slow and steady cardio lost a decent amount of body fat as well. Not quite as much as HIIT, but still, lost a lot of body fat. That's good. The slow and steady group, in fact, lost more body fat compared to the resistance training only group and the combination group. But in this study, at least, what we find is that HIIT is better for losing body fat, but slow and steady cardio is also effective for losing body fat. So in this study right here, slow and steady cardio was effective for weight loss, and it was effective for fat loss. So again, Vince says that slow and steady cardio makes you fatter, but this study, and the one that I cited before, show that slow and steady cardio, in fact, helps you lose weight and lose fat. So the scientific studies right here overwhelmingly debunk Vince. Scientific studies show that slow and steady cardio helps people lose weight and lose fat. And therefore, Vince is lying to you when he says that slow and steady cardio makes you fatter, because these studies prove the opposite. Okay, you can pause the video and read the conclusions here. So, while you want to write down the counter arguments to point number 2 here, this is a good time to talk about a personal story for me. When I was younger, I worked at the Home Depot. All right, I was a cart attendant, and when you're a cart attendant, you work outside. Your job is to gather up shopping carts and put them back into the store. Simple job, but the point I'm making is that when you're a cart attendant for Home Depot, you do a lot of walking. Lots of walking. Walking is slow and steady cardio. Well, I was doing slow and steady cardio in my job because I was walking a lot, but I was also doing slow and steady cardio in my free time as well because I was still running quite religiously. So, because I was running religiously, I was doing slow and steady cardio off duty and on duty. I never lifted a weight at this time. I lift weights now, but I wasn't doing it back then. So, I was doing slow and steady cardio only. I was never weightlifting. Guess what? I lost weight. I lost about 3 to 8 pounds, something like that. I'm not sure which was, fat loss versus water weight or whatnot. But the point I'm making is that I lost a significant amount of weight, which makes sense. I was eating less food, so I was in a calorie deficit, and I was doing slow and steady cardio all the time, which is a lot of physical activity. So you combine me eating less food and doing a lot of slow and steady cardio, I ended up losing weight. And I never touched a weight at all, okay? So I literally lost weight doing slow and steady cardio only. Now, I realize this is an anecdote, but I find it pretty interesting that my story agrees with the scientific studies here. These meta-analyses show that people lose weight and lose fat when they do slow and steady cardio, my Home Depot story kind of supports that. All right? And I think this further debunks Vince's point. Vince says slow-and-steady cardio makes you fat, but that's wrong. My experience with Home Depot and the scientific studies that I cited up here show that slow-and-steady cardio, in fact, helps people lose weight and lose fat. So screw you, Vince. The science says you're wrong. And yeah. So screw you. Science says otherwise. I also got a little skit here that kind of debunks Vince. So enjoy the little skit here. Okay. Ha ha ha. Very, very funny. Okay. Now we're going to move on to our third point. Point number 3 is that weight training only is not better for weight loss and fat loss with respect to slow and steady cardio. All right? Vince argues that weight training is better for weight loss because weight training helps you build muscle. If you have more muscle, you will have a faster metabolism. And if you have a faster metabolism, you will lose more weight and or lose more fat, according to Vince. Now, I will give credit to Vince here. His argument is actually pretty sensible. He's right. Lifting weights will help you gain muscle. And if you have more muscle, you will have a faster metabolism. That being said, there's two main problems with his argument. First off, weight training does not significantly speed up your metabolism. And also, when you look at studies that compare weight training only with slow and steady cardio only, the studies show that slow and steady cardio consistently results in more weight loss and fat loss compared to weight training only. Thus, when it comes to losing weight and losing fat, weight training is in fact worse compared to slow and steady cardio, at least on average. And the studies are pretty consistent on that, as we'll show. Okay, the first thing is that weightlifting does not speed up your metabolism. Or it does, but not to any meaningful extent. Now, I'm not trying to shit on weightlifting here, okay? I do lift weights pretty consistently, all right? I go to the gym about 2 to 3 times a week, and I lift a lot of weights. So, I'm not anti-weightlifting, let's be clear. Weightlifting is a good idea and you should do it. But do not lift weights to speed up your metabolism. All right? It is true that lifting weights does help you gain more muscle, and more muscle does help speed up your metabolism. But that being said, the amount of muscle gain, the amount of metabolism speed up is quite minimal. I'm going to give a really unrealistic example to prove this point. Many people naturally could put on at most 24 pounds of muscle in 1 year. That's 2 pounds of pure muscle per month. That's the extreme high end, as what most people could put on naturally. Okay? The most amount of calories that 1 pound of muscle can burn is about 10 calories, and that's on the high end. So if somebody trains perfectly, no mistakes, perfect diet, magically puts on 0 fat, gains 24 pounds of muscle in 1 year, and that person happens to be extremely genetically gifted and burns 10 calories per pound of muscle, that means that person sped up his or her metabolism by 240 total calories. 240 calories? When you consider that the average person eats 2,000 to 3,000 plus calories a day, that's not significant at all. Alright, so if you gain muscle, you're not going to significantly speed up your metabolism. You will boost your metabolism, but the metabolism boost is extremely small and not significant. And by the way, the number I gave you, 240 total calories, that's not realistic for the majority of people. So even the example I gave is like a pipe dream for most people. What's more realistic, alright, what's more realistic is that somebody puts on maybe 5 to 15 pounds of muscle in a year, and maybe burns like 6 to 8 calories per pound of muscle. So the amount of calorie burnage by gaining muscle is going to be even less than the 240 that I cited here. So if you're going to lift weights, do it. But just understand it will not significantly speed up your metabolism. All right? It's not at all you gain muscle, you can eat like a moron. That's not a good idea. If you lift a lot of weights and get strong, then you eat 6,000 calories a day, you're just going to get fat. And you're going to hate yourself for getting fat. So, lift weights, but just understand that lifting weights does not significantly speed up your metabolism. Okay, and on to the second point I want to make is that slow and steady cardio results in more weight loss and fat loss compared to weight training only, and the studies are pretty consistent on that. We're first going to look at a PLOS One meta-analysis, 2013. And like I said, remember, meta-analysis is a combination of multiple studies here. So this is a lot of data. This is very good evidence. All right, this PLOS One 2013 meta-analysis had 15 included studies. These 15 studies had their participants, and they divided them into 3 groups. The first group did slow and steady cardio. The second group did weight training only. The third group did both a combination of aerobic training, which was mostly slow and steady cardio, and weight training. All right? We're only going to look at the slow and steady group and the weight training only group. In this study right here, the slow and steady group lost more weight and lost more fat compared to the weight training only group. All right? So in this study right here, the group that did slow and steady cardio only lost more weight compared to weight training only. Similarly, the group that did slow and steady cardio only lost more body fat compared to the weight training only group. So in this study, the slow and steady cardio group lost more weight and lost more fat compared to the group that did weight training only. In this study, slow and steady cardio was better for weight loss and fat loss. So this study debunks Vince's point right there. Vince says that weight training is better for weight loss and fat loss, but he's wrong. This study proves the opposite. And by the way, it's not just one study. There's 2 more studies that say that as well. I'm not going to dive too much into the weeds on these, but I'm going to briefly talk about them real quick. The European Heart Journal had a 1-year study published in 2024. In that study, the group that did slow and steady cardio lost more weight and lost more fat compared to the weight training only group. So in that study, the 2024 European Heart Journal study, the slow and steady cardio group lost more weight and lost more body fat compared to the weight training only group. That's essentially the same conclusion as the PLOS One meta-analysis in 2013 that I talked about earlier. So these 2 studies had the same exact conclusion. I should note in the European Heart Journal study, though, the differences in weight loss and fat loss were not significant. However, in the PLOS One 2013 study, the differences between the slow and steady group and the weight training group were statistically significant. So that's just something I should point out to be honest. So those are 2 studies. The third study I'm going to talk about was also published by PLOS One. In this third study, PLOS One 2019 8-week study, there were 66 overweight adults divided into 4 groups in a way similar to the 2024 study I talked about earlier. And in the 2019 PLOS One study, the slow and steady cardio group lost more weight and lost more body fat compared to the weight training only group. All right? So, in all these 3 studies I cited right here, the group that did slow and steady cardio lost more weight compared to the weight training only group. The group that did slow and steady cardio lost more fat compared to the weight training only group. So we have 3 studies that all show essentially the same thing. Slow and steady cardio, in 3 different studies, the slow and steady cardio group lost more weight compared to the weight training only group. The group that did slow and steady cardio lost more body fat compared to the weight training only group. So all these studies show overwhelmingly that slow and steady cardio is more effective for weight loss and fat loss compared to slow and steady cardio. These studies overwhelmingly show that slow and steady cardio is more effective for weight loss and fat loss compared to resistance training only. This utterly debunks Vince's point. So screw him again. Scientific studies show that he's wrong. And like I said, this kind of lines up with my Home Depot study, where I lost weight by only doing cardio and by never lifting a weight. So, yes, I know it's anecdote, and I know that anecdote is not always reliable, but I find it pretty interesting that my anecdote agrees with the scientific studies. Pretty interesting there. You can pause the video and write down all these conclusions if you want. Okay, I'm going to move on to my fourth point now. And, oh yeah, slow and steady cardio is better for weight loss and fat loss, according to scientific studies, and yeah. Okay, the fourth and final point I'm going to make is that Vince, as moronic and as stupid as that sounds, he seriously argues that you should not do slow and steady cardio because it burns calories. That argument is so stupid as hell that I can't believe he seriously said that. Alright? First off, anytime you exercise or do anything in your life, you're gonna burn calories. I don't know if you noticed, but I was turning my light on and off. That burned calories. Not a lot, but still. So I guess according to Vince, I shouldn't do slow and steady cardio because it burns calories. I guess that means I should never turn my lights on or off because that burns calories. That's kind of stupid. I guess that means we should never turn lights on at all and we just walk into stuff because we can't see anything. That's kind of dumb. That doesn't make any sense. Vince also says, and I know as unbelievable as this sounds, he legit said this in one of his commercials. He said, you should not do slow and steady cardio, his words, because it burns calories. And you simply replace those calories when you eat your next meal. Therefore, according to Vince, you should not do slow and steady cardio because it burns calories. That's a bullshit argument and that's nonsense because everything literally you do burns calories. You wake up and take a shower, that burns calories, alright? Not a lot, but still. You eat food, you burn calories. Not a lot, but still. You go to sleep, you burn calories. Not a lot, but still. So Vince says, don't do slow and steady cardio because it burns calories. I guess by his rationale, nobody should ever go to sleep. Sleeping burns calories, after all. So I guess because you shouldn't do slow and steady cardio because it burns calories, you shouldn't go to sleep because that also burns calories. I guess it means we should never go to sleep and we die from exhaustion. That's kind of stupid if you ask me. And also, when you eat food, like I said, you burn calories. Not a lot, but still. So Vince says, don't do slow and steady cardio because it burns calories. I guess that means it's because you shouldn't do slow and steady cardio because it burns calories according to Vince. I guess that means we should never eat anything because it burns calories. I guess we should never eat anything and we die from starvation? That's stupid. So yeah, Vince's argument of don't do slow and steady cardio because it burns calories is a stupid as hell argument because everything burns calories. By his rationale, don't do slow and steady cardio because it burns calories. I guess it means we should never sleep and we die from exhaustion because sleeping burns calories. Oh no. I guess that means we should never ever eat food because eating food burns calories. Oh no. And then we starve to death. That's dumb. That's moronic. Not only that, but he also contradicts himself on the whole calorie burning nonsense because in his own commercials, alright, Vince says that you should do HIIT cardio because it burns more calories relative to slow and steady cardio. As I talked about earlier, HIIT does not inherently burn more calories compared to slow and steady cardio, so he's wrong about that, first of all. But second of all, for the sake of argument, go with his logic here. It's a stupid logic and it's wrong logic, but let's roll with it for a minute. So Vince says, on one hand, don't do slow and steady cardio because it burns calories. But also, do slow and steady cardio because it burns calories. Wait, what? See, he says on one hand, don't do slow and steady cardio because it burns calories, but then do HIIT, which also burns calories? Doesn't make any sense. He also says, again, following his logic here, don't do slow and steady cardio because it burns calories, but also lift weights because it burns calories. Wait, what? So you say on one hand, don't do slow and steady cardio because it burns calories, but do weightlifting, which also burns calories? That doesn't make any sense. That's stupid. So, yeah, I think I've already refuted this point, but his whole argument of don't do slow and steady cardio because it burns calories is stupid as hell. If you're going to follow his logic, we should do literally nothing at all, because everything you do burns calories. And also, when you're saying don't do slow and steady cardio, which burns calories, you can't turn around and say do HIIT, which burns calories. That's stupid, that's moronic, and that's not how this works. So screw you, Vince. Your logic is stupid, it's wrong, and it's not worth listening to. So yeah, you can look at all my points here, and this kind of sums up the video here. So yeah, just everything that Vince says about slow and steady cardio is wrong. First off, HIIT does not inherently burn more calories relative to slow and steady cardio. So there's that. Also, if you look at scientific studies, slow and steady cardio is effective for weight loss and fat loss. And, by the way, no, slow and steady cardio does not make you store fat. That never happens. Scientific studies show that slow and steady cardio results in more weight loss and more fat loss when you compare it to weight training only. And lastly, his calorie argument is stupid and not worth listening to. So, yeah, that pretty much says it all right there. Okay, well, thank you for watching. I appreciate you taking the time to watch this video, and I hope you have a good rest of your day. So, thank you for watching. I'm also going to put some videos in my description that you can check out as well. One of my videos is going to be about how cardio is good for your health. I'm going to put that video in the description. Check it out. And lastly, this is going to piss off V-Shred, but do slow and steady cardio. Like, seriously, do it. It's great for your mental health. Studies show it. It's great for your physical health. Studies prove it. And finally, cardio is just plain fun. So yeah, do slow and steady cardio. It's good for you, and I hope you got into it. Thank you for watching, and I hope to see you next time. One last little thing I'm going to talk about here. I'm going to run the Chicago Marathon, and I'm going to run for a charity called Bless-Ons. Bless-Ons is an organization that gives housing and other services to disadvantaged women. I'll try to put the link in the description below. So if you could donate to my charity for the Chicago Marathon, I would deeply appreciate it. So again, if you could donate, I deeply appreciate it. Thank you so much. And thank you for watching this video. Have a good rest of your day, and peace out. Have a good one.